It's a gorgeous day today. Where I live, mid-October is the most beautiful time of the year. And I want to capture some of the feeling and the color of today in my art journal. This is just an Arteza watercolor journal. It was not very expensive. And so I have been keeping a record of things in here that I've tried. So this was just collage papers and some new pigments. I had a brand new French ultramarine and a couple of new perylines, and I was just having fun with those, as well as with some papers and some things I tore out of magazines. And here are a couple more pages of abstractions of color. This is where I tried some different supplies. I discovered that I really like this makeup applicator Q-tip because it makes this little leaf shape, and so I have wondered whether I could try making a plant or a tree out of that. I really like to experiment with various items, and so today I'm just opening to a fresh page and I'm going to go see what colors I see. I just have my watercolor paints and I have clipped my book open, and that is my favorite watercolor brush. It's actually an Asian calligraphy brush. I've got some water over here, so I'm ready to get started. You don't have to have a fancy set of paints. You could do this project with watercolor paints kind of already poured in the little plastic palette from a craft store. So as I walk around my October garden, I see things that are starting to turn a little bit brown, and I also have some beautiful things that are in bloom. I've been admiring these particularly. This sort of pale lavender purple with the darker purple spots, and the leaves are also really extraordinary. They have this deep maroon, maybe, backside to them, and then the fronts are kind of a yellowy green. So let's try that. My goal is not really to capture these literally, but just to mark down some ideas about color and shape. So I'm using this Daniel Smith lavender paint, and I'm just going to put a little bit of it up here. I think there's actually a little bit more red in the actual flowers as I look at them. Tiny bit of red pigment, so I'm just borrowing a little of that. That's a little closer now. It's more of a violet, right? I'm just trying to create what I see. The other piece that intrigues me are the darker little spots. I like it. So that's my first attempt at capturing what I see. I also want to remember a little bit about the back of that leaf, which is not red like that for sure. I'm going to put some of the French ultramarine into that. Now it's too blue. We go back and forth, right? Interestingly enough, what this is helping me to see is that the color of the flower is not as distant from the color of the leaf as I had initially thought. And because this is watercolor, I'm not going to succeed in getting it ultra dark, but I will still be able to remember something about the quality of plant life that I was seeing. I also like the strap-like leaves of this plant. I'm going to use a pre-mixed green for this one. This is actually Daniel Smith serpentines. My goal is really just to remember the way I found the varying widths of white and green to be interesting. And here some of those blue spots have gotten involved in the green, and that's kind of interesting too. So the next thing I'm discovering in my garden today is this beautiful blue sky, these Georgetown tea roses that have climbed up into the peach tree, and the orange yellow in the peach leaves. So if I look closely at the roses, there's a really vivid pink in them, as well as a much softer kind of apricot. Just as in the peach leaves, I see a really vivid orangey tone against a green that's it's becoming a little dull. So there's that wonderful contrast between intensity and muted shades. In addition, these little heirloom roses are always blooming at this time of year. And they are also a study in contrasts with that intense, deep pinky red, and then that pale, nearly lavender center. So fascinating to me. So I've begun to put some quinacridone opera, that really vivid pink, on the paper as a way to begin. And I'm not trying to paint a rose, but I am interested in these kind of loose rose petal-ish shapes. I think that I need to darken it a little bit to capture that first rose we were looking at. So I'm going to see what will happen if I choose alizarin crimson. Actually mixes with the opera to make something a little more similar to what I saw. By contrast, I would say that the second rose we looked at, the darker one, had this quinacridone opera shade in the center of it. So I'm actually going to pull some lavender into that and see what happens. That's too blue, so I'll get some more of the opera, and to my eye that's pretty similar to what I saw. But you know, we'll all see these things differently, so you should paint what you see when you go on your tour of your garden space. I also want to get that sort of peachy pale color, so more Naples yellow over here, just so you can see. I'm mixing it in wet, and that is really very close to the color that I think I saw. So Naples yellow has a strong amount of pale red to it, so it's kind of an apricot-y. I like to mix it with the brighter pinker and redder colors to kind of tone them down and get some of those soft floral tones. So I'm going back to alizarin crimson, although it is more crimson than I really see in those other roses. So I'm actually going to mix in a tiny bit of blue. The Winsor Newton Intense Phthalo, I'm not sure that I love the effect because it has somehow made the color a lot less vivid. Like, it's so weird that two vivid colors can kind of cancel each other out. So just for the sake of playing around, I'm going to drop some French ultramarine into this side and see what happens. And it's okay, it's interesting. It will help me remember what I saw. Now for those leaves. Remember the leaves. I'm going to start with a hooker's green. I'm sort of doing a leaf shape. There's nothing wrong with doing a leaf shape or any of the shapes. I'm just not tying myself to that automatically. The yellow that I feel I saw in the leaves was really bright. And so I'm going to use this Hansa yellow to try to approximate it as a way of remembering it. And I'm just going to drop it in and let it dance around and mix around. That's really pretty to me. And I also saw some really vivid orangey tones. So I'm also going to use this cadmium red pale hue. I'll just drop it in there as a way to remember what I saw. I want to remember this blue sky also, and to me that looks like French ultramarine. So I'm just going to sort of work that through here, part of the experimentation process. So those are running down, and I'm seeing what that sky color looks like next to all of these other beautiful shades. Notice how the blue makes all of those other colors so much more vivid.